Should you self-publish, get a publisher, or just go on Amazon? We're going to give you the answers to that right after this. Hi, everybody. I'm Scott Patton, your host. Joining us is Brian K. Wright, and we're going to be talking about, what should we do? So, Brian, should people self-publish? Should they get a publisher, or should they just stick their book up on Amazon and cross their fingers?
The short answer is it really depends on what your goals are, and it depends on how quickly you want your book to get to the market. If you want to self-publish, you can get your book out to the market as quickly as you want. Obviously, when you write your book, you want to get it edited first. You want to make sure it's formatted correctly, and you want to make sure it looks presentable and that it's easy to read in terms of the formatting. If you want your book to hit the market pretty quickly, that's a great way to go. And I always have my clients put their book on Amazon, because if you say, where do I buy a book? The vast majority of people are going to say Amazon first. They're not always going to say Barnes & Noble first or Books A Million or anything like that. You can obviously you can buy books there, but you're going to have to go online, and Amazon has the largest presence and the most name recognition. So that's where I usually put my clients. If you want to get with a publisher, there are advantages to that as well. They promise distribution. They have relationships with major bookstore buyers. Think of the fashion industry for a minute. If you have designed this great, t-shirt, dress, jeans, whatever it is, and you want to get into Macy's or Nordstrom or any of the high-end stores, you work with a buyer. Or even if you're wanting to get a product in Target or Walmart, you're working with a buyer. So you can get distribution by having relationships, and book publishers have those relationships with bookstores. The downside to that is you still have to do all your own marketing. Unless you are super well-known or super famous, they're not going to throw a huge marketing budget behind your book, because their agenda, of course, is to stay in business, which means making a profit on your book. So you still have to do that yourself. Not only that, but when you go with a publisher, you relinquish some creative control. For example, when I did one of my books with Morgan James Publishing, they had some very strong feelings about what my cover should look like based on what they quoted as, their experience publishing, which is fine. And they also had some input as to what the title of my book was going to be based on what they thought would sell better. So I had to give into some of that, but they laid it out. They have the relationships with the buyers. They ended up pre-selling hundreds of copies of my book, and it ended up in the bookstore. In fact, the day my book got released, I went to one of my local Barnes & Noble stores to make sure it was there. And sure enough, it was. And I snapped a picture of it. A friend of mine went with me, and we snapped a picture of me standing next to my book. And it's a lot easier to do bookstore signings when your book is in the store. And Right. It's a lot easier to get that done when you have a relationship with a publisher. The caveat is your book will take much longer to get to market. It could be 6 or 9 months after you've gotten done writing your book. So swinging back to my original answer, should you self-publish or should you go to the publisher? It just depends on what your goals are.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say is self-publish, fast, publisher, slow. Neither is necessarily good or bad. We don't want to have the judgment on that, right?
Right.
And as I'm listening to what you're saying, what you've told us so far, which has been brilliant, one of the things that I'm thinking of, and I don't know if this is a good idea or not, but I want to throw it out there, is if I am writing my very first book, I probably want to self-publish it, because I want to do because I'm going to learn a lot in the writing process, and now in the formatting process, in the creating of the cover process, and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And do I want to do that with a publisher that's just going to say, Scott's hopeless, let's not work with him again? Yeah. Or do I want to go through all of that, myself and understand all that part of the publishing, so that when I write my second book, because I'm assuming that we want to write more than one book, right. When I write my second book, or I rewrite my first book, depending on how important that first book is to me, I've had the practice. And now when I go to Morgan James or any, Penguin or any of the other publishers, I'm not looking like right now today. I wouldn't even know what to say or what to ask, right? But
Right.
I think after going through writing the book, getting it on Amazon, figuring out the cover, figuring out how to get someone to buy it, and all that sort of stuff, that by the time I've done that, when I get my second book, because I always feel you have to, if you're going to fail fast, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean,
Now,
I don't know
yeah,
anyone that had a home run the first time they were at plate in Pee
right.
Wee, right?
Yeah.
So take the
It's hard to
swing,
do.
miss the ball, and what have you
Yeah.
learned?
Yeah. Getting a publisher is the holy grail in a lot of people's minds, and it can be. Uh, you may or may not get much of an advance because, once again, the publisher is looking to where they can make their money back. So if you are writing your first book, a publisher is evaluating, how do I know that this author is going to write a book that's going to sell well? I know that when a publisher looks at an author candidate, they want to know what their track record is. They're interested in knowing if you have written other things before. One thing that got me my publishing contract with Morgan James Publishing was when I wrote my very first book, which was a student leadership book. I hustled to sell. I spoke at a couple of local schools, and neither of them had the budget. So, in one case in particular, I looked for sponsors. I went to Walmart first, a local Walmart in the area of the high school. And they said, well, anything over $50 requires corporate approval. And so I said, okay, so if my book is $8 wholesale, does that mean that you would buy and sponsor 6 copies of my book? That's $48. And the lady kind of chuckled and said, yes, we can do that. But it was in the form of a Walmart gift card. So I didn't get cash. I got a gift card. So that paid for 6 of my books. Then what I did is I went to a local Chick-fil-A, which was literally less than a mile away from the school. And he said, we don't normally sponsor things that aren't specific to Chick-fil-A, but I like your mission and I know the school. And he asked, how many copies are you asking me to buy? I said 50. So you want a check for $400? I said, yes, please. And he wrote it.
Wow.
Morgan James Publishing loved the fact that I was willing to go outside the box to sell my books. So they thought, this guy has the temperament to sell his book, so we will take a chance on him. So when
Those are
you're thinking
great
about going with a
stories,
publisher, you
Brian.
have to put yourself in the publisher's shoes. Why should they work with you? How will they know they're going to make their money back? Now, sometimes with publishers, what they will do to make sure they make their money back is they will make it part of their contract that you will buy a certain number of copies from them at wholesale to make sure that it is worth their while.
Right.
And in my contract with Morgan James, it's a lifetime contract. So I have the rest of my life to fulfill the number of copies that I contracted with them to buy. It's not a small number of copies, by the way, because they want to make their money back.
Right.
But you also do get a great deal on the printing of your book because you can buy your copies from them at their wholesale price plus $2. So they make something on the printing. So when you're working with a publisher or you want to work with a publisher, bear in mind they want to make their money back somehow. And they're going to work it into their contract. And they want to know that you are a good enough partner that they can count on you to market your book. You can't, once you write your book, it is your, it's like having a baby. It is yours to feed, help, hold, love, and grow for the rest of your life.
Yeah. So based on our conversation so far, one thing I've heard clearly is whatever you do, get it on Amazon. Obviously, the publisher is going to do that as a matter of course. They're not even going to ask. It's just natural, as well as all the other places that they'll put the book. But from what you said, it sounds like your very first book, you self-published it.
I did.
Yeah, and then you went to Morgan James, and it seems to me that would be a strong. I mean, if you're Tony Robbins or, former president of the United States, that's a totally different story. But us average people who, maybe have 500 friends on Facebook, we're not celebrities. So,
right.
You have,
they know they'll make their money back if they publish a Tony Robbins book because he's got a huge audience. That's the other thing too, when they're evaluating you as a candidate, it's not just how hard are you willing to hustle to sell your book, but how big is your following? And is your following actively engaged? Do you speak
Yes.
frequently so that you have a platform to sell your books? Do you have coaching clients? Have you built a course? So they want to know, how active are you in your industry, in your niche? And if you have a podcast or a radio show, all the better, because they know that you have a built-in audience every single week.
Right. Right. Awesome. Well, I think we've covered that topic. We've given you something to think about, folks. You know, when you're starting out and you're writing, should you publish it yourself? Should you go to a publisher? You're going to have it on Amazon. I think I've got some birds that are very happy with the knowledge that they've learned from us right now. I don't know if you can hear them
They should
chirping,
be.
but I sure can. So thanks for joining us. This is part of our series on book marketing and book creation at www.free-ebooks.com, which reminds me, I almost forgot. Brian, if someone wants to get a hold of you and get some help with their book, where can they go?
They can go to a site called writeabookforyou.com, spelled all the way out, writeabookforyou.com. One of the things that I do is I help people write their books, whether it's coaching or whether it's ghostwriting their book for them. So writeabookforyou.com, you can get a feel for what I do, how I help people. There are testimonials. There's also a link to a segment on a nationally syndicated television show called The List, where I talked about 3 things you need to know to get started writing your book. And then there's also a link to my calendar at the very bottom of the page. Callwithbrian.com is where it'll take you. But writeabookforyou.com is where you can go to learn more about what I do.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day, Brian, to join us. And thank you for watching, everybody. And you authors, time to get to work. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.